Joining us now from Ottawa, Illinois, is Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, always great to have you with us. Does Saudi Arabia have as much leverage over the United States as the president makes it out to be?
I don't think so. I don't think it's a leverage issue. This is one of those I chalk up to, what I have to say, unfortunately, too many times, which is right policy, wrong words. This is a terrible, tragic event. It's egregious. And I think that two-page statement from the president should have used about a page and a half to stress that point and say, we believe it happened. We believe it was probably, according to our intelligence agency, directed by the very highest levels. However, and the thing is, when you look at a terrible area, like Pompeo said, and you see what's going on in Syria, you see the alternative to Saudi Arabia is Iran, who's responsible for 500,000 Syrian deaths as they back Bashar al-Assad, and Russia. You take into account that they've killed journalists in Moscow, political opposition, poisoned in the UK. So you can't fundamentally shift relationships, but it missed a massive opportunity. While we can't intervene everywhere there's a human rights problem, what we can do is use the force of our words, and I think we missed that.
Are you saying that at least when it comes to President Trump sort of trying to defend Saudi Arabia, it's the right policy just because Saudi Arabia is a backbone of American policy in the Middle East, so this is understandable?
Yeah, it's not a bastion of our policy, I think, but really when you look at Middle East politics, you have to pick, in essence, between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That's basically how that's set up there. And while Saudi Arabia is not the best place to be by far, and they have massive human rights violations, Iran has the same thing, and they project power outwards and kill a lot of people, including 50,000 children in Syria. Where I think he missed the opportunity was to say for a page and a half again, this is awful, we don't stand for this, but given the fact that the Middle East is a rough place, we're not going to fundamentally shift our alliance with Saudi Arabia, but we're going to put them on notice. I think that would have been a situation where you'd have some folks disagreeing with the outcome, but I don't think there would be basically bipartisan outrage at the words.
Congressman, essentially you're saying the president's statement was tone deaf. Senator Bob Corker, the outgoing chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, tweeted, "I never thought I'd see the day a White House would moonlight as a public relations firm for the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia." Also, Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican from South Carolina, calling into question his confidence in the new young Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. How does MBS, Congressman, recover from this stumble?
Well, I think the only way to recover is to do a lot better. There's some good things happening in Saudi Arabia in terms of, they finally giving women the right to drive, for goodness sakes. That should have been done when the car was invented, and trying to bring about social change and spreading the, Saudi economy beyond oil. But there has to be a change, which is, in essence, to really bring change to your country as he professes he wants to do. You have to begin to respect human rights. They'll never be, where the United States or our Western allies are in terms of that view. But dismembering a person in the press in your embassy is certainly over the line. And I think that there's a point, America and our authority, like I mentioned, we can't intervene everywhere. We can't take a proactive thing everywhere because we have to have bad allies sometimes. But we can, in the force of our words, make a difference, and we miss that.
Yesterday in that statement that the president released, he cited businesses like Lockheed Martin, for example, saying that the U.S. Ties with Saudi Arabia would help lead to jobs here domestically. But did the president make a mistake? And I don't want to, in not really fully embracing the messaging coming out of the intelligence community, Congressman, that essentially does implicate MBS in the killing of Jamal Khashoggi?
Yeah, I think he made a mistake. I think, look, we can still have the policy he laid out and acknowledge the problem. I also don't like using economics as the reasoning for our inaction or action on some issue. We all know that in international politics, it's real politic. You have to take the economy into account. That stuff matters. But it also really matters in how we talk about it. And it's not diplomatic speak. It's not, just trying to sound good. It's saying that we hold these values to be dear to us. We hold them close to us. And if we lose that moral authority, then when Russia does what they do, inevitably, or when you see human rights violations Africa or other parts of the world, it takes away our ability to have an impact with our words because they just point and say, well, what about Saudi Arabia? So again, while I think the policy is correct, there's no good answers in this situation. Words do matter, and I wish maybe he'd have had somebody else write that statement and reflect that.
Just one more question on this issue. Congressman Brendan Boyle joined us yesterday, and he was talking about a Democratic-led House restoring focus on human rights next year. Is this Congress undermining human rights if, as you said, you have to choose between the lesser of evils, Iran or Saudi Arabia?
Well, I don't think this is going to be like a death blow to our stand for human rights. And, you know, I would welcome the Democratic-led House to have a focus on human rights. What I would caution them is don't use this as a wedge for political purposes. My party did this sometimes under President Obama, where we would take, I say we generically, a side of an issue simply because President Obama's on the other side. I still am an old school politician, even though I'm young. I believe that politics should end at the water's edge. So it's great to focus on human rights, but I hope they don't use it as a way just to wedge with the president, because these are important issues that we can disagree, but we should stand united as best we can.
Congressman, so what will it be like for the GOP as a minority party in the House next year?
Well, you know, I think a lot of the tone in the House is going to depend on what the Democrats do. Do they want to work with us on some issues? Because I think there is some area for common ground. I think whether it's infrastructure, realigning our ability to our job training programs to put them in line with economic need. I think there's a lot of areas we can, probably at the first half of the 2 years, because then it turns into just politics. But I think our job, frankly, this will be my first time in the minority. It's a lot about messaging. It's a lot about talking about our values and what we believe. I think as a party, we have to do a better job of that, undoubtedly. And all I can do is, you know, as being one member of the Republican Party, do my best to do that.
Congressman, I want to switch gears just with regards to Venezuela. There's been some reports that that the administration might argue that Venezuela is a sponsor to terrorism. Do you agree with that notion? I mean, and what, I guess, do you think the strategy should be for the administration standpoint with the Maduro regime?
Well, I think there needs to be a ratcheting up of pressure as best we can, if that means labeling them a state sponsor of terror, because there's a lot of things that come after that, including arms control, et cetera. Then I'm all for it. I mean, there is an oppressed group, basically an oppressed country in Venezuela, very good people, and it's not just an issue of looking in and being sad about what's happening and the starvation and the out-of-control inflation. It's also a reality that we've ignored our hemisphere for a long time, and these things in Venezuela, or whether it's Nicaragua or some of the other areas that are challenged, can affect us. We can see rush to the border. We can see destabilization of our allies like in Colombia. So I would support the administration doing anything and everything to increase pressure on the regime. And while there is a short-term pain with it, and we have to be compassionate about that, this dictator will stay in place without that pressure. And that is long-term the worst thing that can happen.
Does that pressure include additional sanctions?
Yeah, I think additional sanctions. I think, you know, obviously any tool we have economically, diplomatically, informationally, and even militarily. I'm not calling for intervention, but I think, you know, the ability to have intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, those kinds of things that feed the information side of it is extremely important.
Congressman, always great talking to you. Thank you. Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Republican of Illinois.